Yeah, no problem.
Sorry. All right. You're good.
I'm good to go? All right. The time is now 7 o'clock. We'll call the Sutton School Committee meeting to order. Pursuant to Governor Baker's July 16th, 2022 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, this meeting of the school committee is in a hybrid format with both in-person and Zoom components. To join the meeting, visit www.zoom.us/join and enter meeting ID number 832-4451-7045. Passcode 481053. The meeting will be broadcast and recorded on local public access station Verizon 31 and Charter Spectrum 191, and live streamed on the town's YouTube channel when available. A recording of the meeting will be available on the town's website and YouTube channel. The school committee meeting has been called to order. Each member should state their name and whether they are attending in person or remotely.
Ben Gibbons, in person.
Bruce Edwards in person.
Brennan in person.
Jennifer Darling, in person.
Nate Jerome in person. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we'll open it up for public forum. If there's anyone wishing to speak, this is the opportunity. I don't see anybody in the crowd, and the Zoom looks pretty quiet. All right, moving along. Consent agenda. Reviewing the minutes from November 7th, 21st, and the executive session minutes from the 21st, and bill schedules dating November 10th and 17th.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
My second.
All right, any comments? Questions? Okay. All those in favor?
Do you want to have?
Oh, sorry.
Do you need a roll call vote? Because I need to abstain.
Yes.
Gibbons abstain.
Okay.
Edwards, aye.
Brennan, aye.
Darling, aye.
Jerome, aye. Carries 401. Do you have a question?
I didn't know whether you want to do a roll call or
Oh, yeah, sorry. Just taking it implied. Next item on the agenda is the education update. Dr. Randy?
Thank you. Tonight is one of the more exciting nights superintendents will tell you that they have, because each year we are asked to identify and to present a high school student with the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents Award. This year, I'm very pleased to be able to present to you Mr. Nathan Hastings. Nathan is a senior who is a standout at Sutton High School academically, as well as civically and socially. He is currently enrolled in 4 advanced placement courses. One of his teachers notes that Nate is an invaluable member of any classroom that he is in. He is the most consistent and willing participant. From Shakespeare to calculus, Nate is constantly putting his best foot forward and helping his classmates along the way. His kindness, warmth, and dedication set him apart and allow him to be the best student he can be. In addition to being engaged academically, Nate is also an athlete and someone who participates meaningfully in clubs and activities. Principal McCarthy states, Nathan is an exceptional student and an incredibly positive member of the community. In addition to his skills in the classroom, he is also a member of the golf and baseball teams, as well as connections in the National Honor Society. Nathan is someone who generally makes any group he is part of better and more positive. He is exactly the kind of student that we hope to have our younger students aspire to be. Over the last 2 years, Nathan has received the Dartmouth College Book Award, the AP Scholar with Distinction Award, the Outstanding Achievement in AP Physics Award. He's been recognized for excellence in chemistry and outstanding academic achievement. Nathan is interested in pursuing his studies at the collegiate level in mechanical engineering. He has aspirations of becoming an engineer and using math and science, 2 subjects he's passionate about, to make positive change in the world. He gives credit to his support network of family, teachers, coaches, and classmates for his success and his achievements. He feels that they have encouraged him to push himself and to continuously learn and strive for higher achievements. I'm honored this evening to be able to present to you this year's recipient of the MASS Superintendent's Award, Nathan Hastings. At this time, I'd ask if Nathan and his family would join us up here for a presentation and some photos. Di, would you take It's quite a resume. So each student who receives this receives a certificate from the state level, signed. Just ask, you might just have to take a couple pictures and we'll post it on the minute. Okay? Thank you very much. Congratulations. Here's all, and I'll do it for you too. You don't have to stay for the whole meeting. We understand. Excuse me, and thank you very much for your ability to flex with us on the meeting so that you could attend the other events, yes.
Thank you.
Nate, congratulations. I still like to give you this after the broken thumb way back in baseball. It's just always a joy. But great to see you here, and no surprise at all. That's fantastic. Congratulations. All right. Next item on the agenda is the middle school principal update. Welcome. Or
Hello, everyone. This chair's pretty high. Wow, I feel tall up here tonight. Okay, I'm just here tonight for the Project 351 update. Project 351 finally reunited at Gillette Stadium for their reunion after 880 days of being apart. So we reunited in June, and it was awesome. Levi was able to meet some of his peers that he had connected with in the virtual Service Leadership Academy, so that was great. Levi is over at BBT this year, making us proud, so I hope he continues on with his service and leadership there, because he did a great job with us in Sutton. I am excited and pleased to announce that our 2023 student ambassador is Edith Tufts. Super excited for Edith. She is a member of our student council, a member of the band, as well as the community band. She is a member of the robotics team, and she volunteers for any and everything, every open house. Anytime we're looking for kids to pitch in and help, Edith is always there with a smile. She's ready to help us. She's a great peer. She's a great friend, and she's a really valuable and positive member of our school community. So I'm very excited for her to start her Project 351 journey. January 14th, we'll travel to Boston for launch day, and the kids will engage in some service with their peers. Project 351 selects an 8th grade student from each of the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts and unites them together in a year-long student-led ambassador journey of leadership and service. So it's a really positive, great community. I've been also very fortunate. I'm a member of the advisory group, and I have connected with just all sorts of different educators and people who participate in service regularly throughout the years. I've been a part of this probably, for 12 years now. So I've grown with the program, and it's been really great to see how it's grown and evolved and blossomed, because they do a lot of nice work, and the ripples just wave through the state. It's fantastic. So very excited for Edith. She's excited, her family's excited, and we're ready to get going. So they're on the onboarding process right now of getting the kids ready. Project 351 does a great job communicating with families and kids about what the experience will be like in Boston in January. So between me and the Project 351 team, Edith will be ready to go in January.
excellent.
Yep.
Any questions? I know.
I know, another
Near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
It is definitely a worthwhile, life-changing event for some of these kids, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank you for continuing to be so involved. It's such a great program, and we've seen the students come through, and it's very impressive.
To go to Gillette Stadium the day after school got out in June, I was exhausted. But to go there, the community everybody, it was so uplifting. Everybody was together. We were able to serve and make a positive difference. It was really nice to reconnect with that group. So, and just a quick invitation, if you'd like to come to the middle school band concert, it's Wednesday at 7 p.m., so we'd love to see some of you there.
Excellent.
That's
Thank you.
all I've got for you tonight.
Thank you, Ann.
Okay, no problem.
All right, are we doing an athletics update?
We had just a brief athletics update under the superintendent's report.
Oh, because we have down that Rich as the athletics director attending, is that?
Mr. Levin-Savage was called out of town due to a family emergency.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. All right. Next item on the agenda is budget and finance. We'd like to welcome Harrison McKinley, our business manager.
All right. So I'd like to start tonight by giving a brief FY '23 budget update. I know I had the pleasure to have Jen over in my office to basically run through how I prepped this one-page summary sheet and basically the general gist of how Sutton functions financially. And, you know, I took a lot of pleasure, and I think Jen got a lot out of that meeting, and how to understand what we do in the business office just a little bit more. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to reach out to anyone else that might be interested in learning that extra little bit that they might have questions on, and have that opportunity out there. So if anyone is interested, feel free to reach out to me through email. But without further ado, I'd like to get into the FY '23 budget update. So again, like I mentioned last month, we are continuing to narrow in on a process and format that works best for my office, and I'm trying to take in as much input and feedback from every meeting, and I do get a decent amount of it to develop something that works for everyone. So what we, or what my office handed out this monthly meeting was a one-page basic summary that covers almost every major financial item and area. And how we broke this one page out is by three categories: our revolving accounts, grants, and the general budget. These are the three major funding areas for the school, with the general budget being the most prevalent. But you know, it does shed a little bit more light on the revolving accounts as well as the grants. And one item of great excitement for tonight to notify everyone is that the aftercare department is actually in the positive. So I know that was something that I went into a little bit last month, and how we were implementing corrective actions both in my office with the director of the aftercare program and with the superintendent to streamline their salary and expenses. And I think that with proper oversight, we have now turned that department around and made them positive for this fiscal month. So I look forward to continuing to observe that throughout the next couple fiscal months to see if that trend continues. I have no indication that it wouldn't, but we will continue to monitor that. So that's exciting news, and we hope that it ends the fiscal year on a positive note as well. Another area that I will continue to monitor is the preschool revolving account. We are still showing a negative balance for that program, but there is a delay in recording the tuition fees or the revenue for that program. It's my hope that within the next coming weeks, the town hall will have those updated in Munis, which will then allow my office to accurately reflect the revenues against the expenses that the program has occurred for this fall. So what you see there is a negative $17,274.80, but that's also reflecting $0 in tuitions recorded. So it's my hope that it is a positive, but until those are posted in Munis, we will continue to monitor that. So going through the rest of the revolving accounts, the total revolving account balance is $1,700,919.80. This is a decrease from the previous fiscal month of $361,816.95. The vast majority of that was due to fees paid out of circuit breaker for out-of-district tuitions, as well as the continuing funding of our lunch program. We are monitoring to make sure that the federal and state revenue for those programs are distributed. Currently, they are still listed as processing on the federal and state website. I have been told that within the next week or so, those funds will start to be distributed, so that is good news for the school lunch revolving account. Moving into the grant section, I have more good news to share. We have continued to correct the negative balances on all grants and monitor accurate, timely distribution of funds. So although in a perfect world, grants are going to be negative for the majority of the fiscal year, and that then at the end, the distributions will catch up to the expenses. We're trying to do this in a more timely manner so that when the expenses are occurred, within the next fiscal month, that distribution is requested from whether it's the federal or state granteeing portals to accurately reflect that. It gives a better idea for my office to see where we are financially for whatever grant it might be. And we've been doing that on almost a weekly basis for requesting funds. So I hope that we continue to monitor that. And just to give a brief update on the general budget, we are currently expensing at a normal rate. I tried to group in some of the major financial categories, being the salary expense, other expenses, general supplies, and contracted services. That is almost 80% of the general budget grouped into those 4 line items, and we continue to encumber most of those expenses throughout the entire year. So things like the transportation services for AA, those fees aren't expected to change on a month-to-month basis, so we encumber for the entire year, and that's reflected in the contracted service line below. So we're given $1.3 million to start the fiscal year, and it shows that we've expensed $1,039,681.53. That's including the entire year's encumbrances for things like the AA transportation fees. So in my mind, it's better to encumber things that aren't going to change. It gives us a better, accurate idea of how much we're left with after those encumbrances are put into Munis. So with that being said, there's $275,834.47 left in the contracted service line, for an example. That will be consumed by just general other expenses that aren't large enough for my office to encumber throughout the entire year, and will be expensed as they're created in Munis, which will leave us with $10,963,847.99 left for those 4 line items. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because for salaries, I would like to eventually encumber salaries throughout the year, as I've done with AA transportation fees, but I'm still looking into the viability of this, because salaries are a little bit different than a contract, where they do have, you know, some wiggle room in changing. You might have an employee no longer work for you, but if you encumber that expense throughout the rest of the fiscal year, you'd have to go in and edit that. So we're still seeing if it's a viable option to encumber salaries, which is why you see such a large remainder balance, and that's because depending on how the teacher elects to receive their salary, it'll change. Again, that's just a basic update for the FY23 budget of where we stand. At this point, I don't see any major areas of concern that need drastic correction, but I open it up for any questions that you might have, or feedback on this 1-page report, how you might like to see it develop going further.
Questions?
I have a question.
Yeah?
This is great. This paints a really good picture, gives me comfort on where we are. Couple quick questions on the grant allocations. The beginning balances of negatives for ESSER 2
Correct.
and ESSER 3. Can you give me some help on that?
So my office and the prior administration, as these grants spanned multiple years, so my office didn't apply for these grants. The balances were negative in the previous fiscal year. So proper distribution of funds from the granteeing portal did not take place. So we started the fiscal year off with a negative balance. In September, when I closed the prior fiscal year, we had, expensed $227,000 without having the distribution to cover that. But because the grant spans multiple years, we didn't have to request those funds to cover those expenses. We should have, but we didn't in time. We now have requested those funds, so if you look from the beginning balance of negative $227,932. And then the October balance, we were at a negative $32,945. That is because the funds that my office requests to be distributed from the state were then received and then accounted for. And then from October to this month, you'll see that the balance is now zero. Those funds have now been distributed completely from the state's portal, and now that grant can be closed out on the town side.
Okay, thank you.
Question, and maybe we talked about this. What about the grants that have zeros?
So the grants that have zeros, I don't know if you wanna pick an example.
Like 114?
So with some of the grants, we might have a zero in the beginning balance depending on when we applied for the grant. So 114 is a relatively new grant. I think we applied for this past month or maybe the month before. So to begin the fiscal year, because we didn't technically apply for the grant, we wouldn't have any monetary value in there. And depending on if it was in October or November, that again would show a zero. So they might be grants that we're in the process of adding into Munis, and we don't actually have a distribution from the state. With all grants, you receive a or not all grants, but the majority of grants, you receive a 10% distribution upon approval. Once that 10% approval is sent over to the town, then an account's created on the town side in Munis after I've supplied the necessary information. So a number of these grants are brand new and they're still in process, but they're included in here to allow myself the flexibility to update them, 1 month down the road.
Do you have like a tally of like how much we have in grants? Like,
Yes, so my office maintains a accurate Excel spreadsheet that's updated almost weekly with expenses as well as requests for distribution of revenue.
Yeah, I think this is, I like this. It's a good, quick summary view. I was gonna ask you about the salary encumbrance, but I think you did a great job explaining that, why we've chosen not to go that route, because in the past we have. But I also understand the volatility of that, and not the volatility, but it can change. One of the things that I'm struggling with, and it's probably just me, reading this, I'm used to reading left to right, and I see the October balance, and then the ending balance, and then the November expense. I think that's just something I have to get accustomed to, because I'm used to you take this number minus this number, that's your total.
And if it's something that everyone is in consensus of, that it might be an improvement, it's an easy fix, right? I could easily
If it's
move
only
it
me
one
bringing
column
up,
over.
I wouldn't bother. One of the things that, everything that you just mentioned was very helpful in understanding this. I think if you have somebody that's not involved with this sort of activity, they can see something with a negative amount and say, oh, that's concerning. But once you explained it, it made complete sense. I always like the idea of, I don't know if it's a footnote that goes along with this or another little page that just, hey, here's how you read this.
Mhm.
And that way, hopefully most people in town could pick it up and like, oh. And then you're like, well, I have a question, but here it is. It's a little explanation of how to read this. It just makes it a little bit easier to have people consume it. But Harrison, I think this looks great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So if there's any other questions.
The 4 items you picked from the general budget, on the other items, I get, we've got 80% here. Any visibility to overspending that's had to occur, or overspending you think might have to occur?
Generally, the other items are very de minimis in value. It might be like a library textbook item or a substitute salary item, and I'm actually going to dive into the substitute piece after this. But they're small enough in nature, and historically, we've never gone over budget in any of those. If we're going to go over in budget, I'm not saying we are, it would be in one of these 4 segments here. That's the highest likelihood of any budget overage. Not to say that it can't happen, but currently speaking, I don't have any of those line items that are leading me to believe that they're gonna go over budget for the end of the year. And if they were, and I intend to develop this further, they would be incorporated on here to discuss.
That's my request is if you do see an item that you think is gonna go over, and I understand there's small values,
Mhm.
they tend to be the very few values on the budget we can take any particular action on.
Mhm.
The salaries are what they are. So I would wanna be able to read into this and know that if there was something that you saw going over, we would be told about it there. That
Mhm.
silence means you don't see any of that or not be, okay? And movement between schools, are you seeing that in the budget?
What do
that
you mean by movement between schools?
So if we have budgeted the same line item across a couple of different schools, how do you deal with that if one school is seeing more expense than you anticipated?
So currently, I have yet to see any one school be over in any particular budgeted line.
Substitute and maintenance are things that come to mind that,
However, once and I do expect that to happen. I mean, it happens with every school in every fiscal year. My office, in coordination with the town accountant as well as the school committee, we would then have to, from my understanding, bring it up to vote to request funds to be transferred from one account to another to cover any overages on any particular line item within a specific school. So as we progress further into the fiscal year, that will become more relevant because we'll start to exhaust funds in the general budget for, facilities over time, because there's just such a few dollar amount allocated to that line item. It might be $4,000 and they might be $5,000, total. So we would then have to, my office would look into what school might have, funds left over. Maybe one of the schools didn't use that line item to the extent another building did. Then we would see the viability of moving those funds in accordance with the town accountant, as well as bringing it forward at school committee before we actually do anything on our end.
excellent, thanks. Yeah, so if it's under the same category, not seeing this, you don't anticipate moving between schools the same budget? There are years where that's occurred, and we just wonder where.
So far, we haven't seen anything too major, but I do anticipate as we progress throughout the fiscal year that will come up, and we'll address it as it does.
Excellent, thank you. Substitute teacher pay?
Yep, so moving into the substitute teacher pay, something that my office has noticed, as well as getting feedback from all of the buildings, is it is very difficult right now to get interested individuals to apply to become substitute teachers at any grade level. We are seeing that each substitute line for all 4 buildings is being underutilized because, one, my office believes that the rate for the subs is not great enough to attract the candidates there. Worcester Public Schools, I believe, raised theirs to $110, and a number of other towns and surrounding communities have also followed suit to become more competitive. So it's my hope that if we raise the substitute teacher rate, we'll attract more attention, and then we'll be able to utilize these funds in the substitute line items. Currently, what we're seeing in all 4 buildings is they aren't able to find substitutes. I mean, the positions to apply to become a substitute are always live on School Spring. I think almost every teacher and administrator is communicating to everyone they know to see if they're interested in individuals to become substitutes, and we're just not seeing any response. So a lot of the IAs are being asked to assist in covered classes if there is a need for a substitute, which is putting a heavy strain on a number of departments throughout the school. So it's really not benefiting anyone because we're not utilizing the substitute line item. I mean, right now, I think we're only about 25% of the budget used for substitute lines, and we're nearing 50% of the way through the fiscal year, and we've only used about 25% of the substitute budget, and we're getting feedback that there are no subs to pull. That makes my office look around to other school districts to see what we might be doing wrong, and something that I've seen is our substitute rate, it seems like it's not competitive enough, and that's why I'm proposing that we raise the substitute rate to $100 for the day. And
May I?
yes.
So we looked at 17 different surrounding districts too. Typically, we were seeing a range of 95 to 105, as Harrison mentioned. There were some that were higher. There was only one that was lower. The one that was lower then turned in and came to us and said, are you thinking about raising yours because we're doing the same? So the proposal for $100 puts us in the middle of where the average is, certainly not at the top, but I think that the difference between the 95 and even just the 100 getting to that mark, it's just a better piece, and it keeps us a bit more competitive.
All right. I would entertain a motion to approve increasing the pay for daily substitute teachers from $80 a day to $100 a day.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
There was a plan or a program we had where we were looking at long-term subs or utilizing somebody who would be there regular. Is that occurring, and would this be the same rate?
No, the long-term sub is a bit more, and that is occurring, and that was, in fact, we still have 2 in place.
But not sufficient, and we can't find more in that space?
Right, because the long-term subs are actually assigned to cover, say, maternity leave, or something that is consistent. This is the daily sub rate that we're looking at.
Sorry, there was a discussion, and I don't remember when, that we were looking at possibly bringing on a sub who was sort of floating, but we paid him the week and used him wherever. Are we doing that at all, or is that not?
We do not currently have one person. We have one building that does not have someone in that particular role. We have 2 buildings that do.
And does it work effectively, but we can't find people to do that, or?
Right, I mean, we had one building last week, we had 9 people absent, and we had the one person who was in and available. Certainly coming back off of the Thanksgiving week, we did expect to see a bit of an uptick, and it occurred. We'll see the same thing usually when we return in December and in January. We have reached out to local colleges. We have put our name into a virtual job fair. I did just receive a letter from the new chancellor for the University of Massachusetts at Lowell, inviting us for a conversation around further collaboration, being familiar with their education program. I've taken her up on that opportunity and requested a meeting to anything that we can do to try to streamline and to look at student practitioners and opportunities for people to be learning differently and to think about it differently, so that we can leave IAs in place when possible is definitely the preference. The benefit of the IAs are that they know the students, but the big detractor for that is it pulls them out of their typical assignment. We have principals who are teaching. We have Harrison, who has done bus duty at times. People are just pitching in where we can. We are not alone. It's a national dynamic right now that the districts are seeing.
And if you go to the $100 rate per day, how does that compare to the long-term rate? Like, do we then make it cheap or more profitable to do daily than?
No, the long-term rate is still above this particular. We voted that one through at 110.
Any other questions?
But if we go back and reset the calendar to the beginning of the school year and had no issue finding substitutes, what would the difference in cost be?
That would be so dependent on who we have that's absent, right? So we've had an unanticipated long-term absence that caused us to have to use some funds in one area. If you're talking about $20 a day, if you averaged 4 subs a week, $80 a week at each of the schools, $320 times 30, what, 10,000?
Okay, thank you.
And you think it's about four?
That's
Honestly, there are some weeks.
I get it's throwing a dart.
Right. There are some weeks where it's not really much at all. I think the best that we can do right now is to continue to monitor and look at what the impact on this year's budget is. If we need to make some changes before final budget is voted through, we'd have to look at that. I see no indicators right now that a lot of substitutes are going to be coming out of the woodwork, but it doesn't mean that we don't try. There could be somebody out there watching tonight who is just itching to be a sub, and great. I think
Over the top.
I think that we have to keep looking at how are we doing it. What we're doing right now isn't working. And what we're doing in education right now for some reason. So it's going to force us to really just take a different look at what do we do as practitioners to bring people into the field and to say, you know, try this. How can we work more with colleges and be flexible with contractually what we're expecting? You know, and maybe look at bringing in students for you know, a half-day assignment.
I like the way you asked the question, Bruce, in terms of, so if we were budgeting for next year at $100, endlessly optimistic that whenever we needed a sub, we'd be able to get one, how much money would we be budgeting?
I think we would raise it by, at that point, I think it was what, 10,000 is what we thought we would need
Okay.
to cover the difference.
That's the difference, or that's how much you'd budget on?
Excuse me.
It's the increase.
Difference.
$80 a day.
Yeah.
Do you,
So we had $80.
where will we pull this funding from, assuming we vote yes?
So, currently speaking, we have never utilized the entire substitute line items across any 4 buildings. So, you know, currently we are well under the 50% budget rate, and we're nearing that for the fiscal year, so we should have plenty of funds already allocated to those budgeted lines. And every year it seems like we've historically had funds left over in the substitute lines, so I wouldn't anticipate that any of those would go over into a deficit. And one thing that I hope to really limit, and what I've been seeing right now, is interfighting between each building. I mean, there's only a set pool of substitutes for all 4 buildings to pull from, and if you have people out in every building, all 4 of those principals are then fighting to see who gets the sub today. And that's just a bad scenario to be in, really.
Not so much fighting as professional
Yeah.
debates.
Yeah.
Get up
Yeah,
earlier,
part of it too
call
is
sooner.
schedules, right? You know, we have moms or dads who have, they can only work an elementary schedule. Or because of work, or because they have students at the high school, they would prefer to work a high school schedule, though maybe their students do not prefer that they're working that particular schedule.
Maybe in January and February, December, January, we can use recent graduates over the past couple of years.
Oh,
It's
yes.
a way to get word out to them anyways.
We were actually able to take advantage of that during the Thanksgiving break because a number of college students had the week off.
The key there is getting them in the pool of vetted potential substitutes, correct?
Mhm.
Then they're on the list, and we call them as we can. All right. Any further questions? Roll call vote.
Gibbons, aye.
Edwards, excuse me, Edwards, aye.
Brennan, I.
Darling, I.
Jerome, aye. All right, carries 5-0. Great. And then the final one is further discussion on options for school choice.
So we discussed the idea of revisiting the school choice policy because we've been approached by families, thank you, Harrison. We've
Thank
been
you,
approached by
Harrison.
families requesting the ability to have their students remain in school if in fact circumstances force them to have to move. We had the example that someone said we could share regarding the inheritance of a family home right on the border. Their preference would be for their students to remain here. The way that the situation is currently set up, that would not be in alignment with school committee policy. You asked for me to come up with some scenarios, some options. I do have them. I'll just present them to you. We talked about a vote in January, so I'll leave you with a write-up of what we talk about, and then we can look at the vote for next month. But the first one that we just outlined briefly last time was to allow students in any grade to remain if at least one sibling is eligible through a grade 9 opening. So this would be taking the current configuration of opening up slots. If that student is selected, then the siblings could remain as well. Students outside of grade 9, in this case, in this scenario, would have had to have completed at least one grade. That was the more restrictive one that we talked about, the narrowest. Option 2, the benefit.
Excuse me, so those are students who attended here in the past,
These were students who had completed, in this case, at least one full year.
here,
Yeah,
okay.
in Sutton. And then they have a student who was eligible for grade 9 consideration. So if that student in grade 9 was to go in, we would say, we would allow the siblings to remain too because we had one eligible.
Okay, this is not the current situation where we allow people to enter a for want of that term, a drawing for positions.
Correct.
A kid gets selected for grade 9 and has siblings in 4th grade and 3rd grade, those kids don't come in, just the kid going into grade 9.
This one would allow students in any grade to remain.
This-
Not to remain, they'd be new.
Yeah, if it was a new kid coming, but it would have to be, the other students would have to have attended at least one school year within district.
Okay,
Yep.
I just wanna make sure the other,
Yep.
Yep, so the qualifier in that case would be the grade 9 eligibility.
I'm lost now.
And then if,
I'm sorry, I'm lost now.
okay,
This is, you got a family who's been here for at least a year, they're moving out. There is an opening in 9th grade, and they have a 9th grade, so the 9th grader can come, plus all of their siblings who have been here for a year.
yes, as long as they've completed at least a year. So it's not like they've been in school for 2 weeks. The idea behind that particular scenario that schools use is because it supports the disruption to student learning. In this case right here, it would eliminate that. The family doesn't have to split districts for their students.
With that example, you would have a situation where you had the oldest sibling would be at least going 9th grade, would be opening to that. You could have a youngest sibling that is yet to attend the elementary school. They would have to go to their new district. The other siblings could stay in district because they've completed it.
Except that we open up some slots in kindergarten and they would be eligible for.
We can always open up slots,
Yeah.
but it would have to be to us opening up a slot. We've made it a point to typically do 9th grade and above because that's what we can manage. But yes, that would be the case where you could potentially get a family where not all the kids are going to the district, but the ones that had had a year in district, it would be a continuation of their involvement in the district.
And just, sorry,
Yeah.
the ruling would be, would that 9th grader have to be part of a random drawing, or have we always had more slots than we have applicants for 9th grade, so we haven't worried?
We currently have a slot open.
So are you talking
Even
about,
now.
I'm sorry, now I'm confused too. Are you talking about a student who is already enrolled in grade 9 and will be moving?
So this is an actual scenario right
Because-
now that we are facing.
Because right now the policy is any high school student, if they're already enrolled and they're gonna move, they get to stay here.
correct.
So it's not just grade 9.
Right.
it's-
Correct.
So,
But in
and
this
then you're
case,
saying
The
if
9th
they
graders is the caveat to any other sibling who has already been here to remain.
Okay.
Under the current policy, any of the students that are currently in high school would get to complete through Sutton. The younger siblings would have to attend their new district. So the thought is if you had a family that was leaving the district, but not too far, within school choice, could potentially send their other siblings here if they were part of the district previously. Again, what we'd want to be careful of is you have a scenario where you have, an older sibling that's a 9th grader, and then you've got 3 pre-K kids. That changes the complexion of everything. So that's why I think that having attended one school session, one school year is important.
So that's one scenario. That's a restrictive one.
But you know what's gonna happen. We're gonna run into that situation, and those people are gonna attempt to make our lives miserable and drag this out by, why can't this pre-K kid come into school here and be with that older sibling?
And that's why we have to make sure our policy is upfront and straightforward.
So under scenario 2,
Okay, but I'm gonna go back to one to ask
But
a question again.
we're gonna get all of these in writing
You are.
before we get anywhere close to actually
are.
voting.
Yes.
So we
Okay, but
we
are we
we'll get
talking-
more info.
Because
Is what
the
I'm
other
trying to
option
say.
is there's no change to policy.
Right.
right. Another scenario would
Sorry.
be allow
Did-
students in any
go.
grade to remain if they have completed at least one full grade level, no other qualifications. So you've been here, you've completed at least a year, you can remain. That could be any grade. So that is another scenario. Third, you could provide a legacy option for families who have a student who was eligible to stay and also enroll any future students. The caveat there, though, would be, I would suggest, as long as class sizes are not within 15% of capacity, because that's a difficult one. This now engages elementary school as well. We have to say 15% of capacity would be about 4 students. So as long as we're not within that, you could open it up. There are districts that do that. They set a capacity balance or a level,
is that per year or at the start of that, because it
So
changes
once
from
you're
year to
in,
year?
once you're in, you're in. But you do not have to open up, seats at grade levels where there may not anybody, or where there may not be anyone. In this case right here, this would be, if it's a legacy, you could enroll as long as we are not within 15%. You could make that 20%, it could be 10%. But 15 seems to be about what I was seeing and looking at it. Another scenario would be to open school choice for just all grades 9 through 12. Nothing, that could just be a 9-12. That right there would provide us a greater deal of flexibility. It lets us maintain class sizes that support the programming and some of the extracurriculars and the athletics that are supporting both the student population and the community expectations. I've included in here some of the research too, as far as, you know, students in high school who do participate in school choice tend to academically perform a bit stronger. There's an idea behind it that there's buy-in. You tend to have parent support for that, because transportation is not provided. This is an all-in commitment by the family, as would be any other school choice piece. The last one would be to open school choice for all grades 6 through 12. I met with Principal Corin regarding this, and we talked about class sizes there. We talked about the size of the classrooms. We talked about the offerings, and the fact that with some of our class sizes getting smaller, it is conceivable that we could be sending off to high school very small classes, in which case, do you open them up in 9th grade, or do you actually just start to build that community in 6th grade, where we right now could accommodate and be able to expand some of the offerings that we have. So those were the 5 different scenarios, right? There is no scenario right here where I just said, make it an open choice for all grades, because that would not serve it wouldn't serve right now what our needs are. We have some elementary classrooms that have size limits. We have some numbers that are very high. Again, we can post and pull. There are a number of districts that you'll see maybe kindergarten and first have openings, and then there's nothing again until 6th grade. It just depends on the population. That said, we had a lot of late enrollments this past year, so a grade level that looked like we had more space than we had did fill up. I did not propose any open enrollment right now for grades lower than 6. They would have to have some kind of a prior relationship or a family member who was already here. In this case right here too, I think that we would have to look at when we award the school choice seats. Typically districts do it twice. They'll do it the first round in June, and then you have 10 days, 14 days to make your commitment. They ask for that from the families in writing. You can then look at where you are in August. August 15th is the typical date. You'll see school districts open it back up again and say, first come, first serve. You can go back and offer it to anyone who may not have been selected if there was a lottery. Or at that point, it's first come, first serve, which is supported by the law.
We were gonna check some of the questions in the last meeting, whether there were legal issues. Did that go through?
So what we did was we followed the Mass General Law on it, which was just very specific about, you have to post your dates, you have to post your policy, you have to post the number of seats that are open, you have to then post your selection process. It can be something as a general drawing or a randomized drawing.
The questions we had around if there was someone who had been here and leaving, can they take precedence over things of that nature?
Right,
But
so-
those are covered in Mass General Law, and you're pretty comfortable that the way you read it, we're okay?
The way that I read it, it's okay. If we were to provide a precedent statement without having something that was published that outlined what the policy was, then we would be in violation.
So with that, if our policy just said it was a general lottery, we'd be out of compliance with letting people who had been part of the community remain in the community.
If they
But
were
we
to
have
take
it in our
precedence.
policy saying that they get to remain.
Right,
Yeah.
yes, and they couldn't take precedence over someone else, because then that's not a general
Yep.
lottery.
If we did something grades 6 through 12,
Mhm.
what about siblings? Would that be a no?
That's what's put forward to us. to
Or
have
no,
to think
well,
about.
is it in that one?
And this one right here, number 3 would be provide a legacy option for families who have a student who is eligible, and then enroll other family members too. It really, that one, I'm probably the least comfortable with that one right there, because there's less around the guidance for that piece. I think it's, you know, it's one of those right now where, if you were asking me what I would do, I would suggest right now we consider discussion at the next meeting too around opening school choice for all grades 6 through 12, and then considering the ability for someone to stay.
6 to 12 for everybody, or 6 to 12 for anybody who's still in this criteria of leaving the district and wanting to stay?
I think right now we could actually fit comfortably and program for an open enrollment in.
For everybody, nothing to do with, so I have concerns that we started with a discussion that we had a specific case and we were talking about how to handle it. And now, without any real reading, we've gone through the options, but what we're hearing is let's open school choice, a touchy subject, to say the least.
Well, technically now, school choice is open, we just decide every year how many slots we have in each grade. So
And
we
we-
could continue to have 0 slots in 6 through 8.
Sure, and every year when we talk about and have those decisions, we say, hey, we should really talk about how do we wanna do this philosophically.
Mhm.
And what we've done is we've talked about one specific case, and now next week, or next meeting, we're voting on recommendation to open up 6 to 12 for everybody. That sounds like a change in the policy.
Did we close 6 up? I think we took a practice of, we typically believe that we will be opening 9 and upwards, because that's where we can absorb it. Because that's where the numbers are more predictable. You're talking about a shorter span. But I don't know that we ever officially said, yeah, we will not do anything below grade 9. I think it's been a practice, but
I think it's been a difficult conversation and hasn't
Yeah.
been all agreement. And we've said we really should talk about and put on the schedule, how do we wanna do school choice rather than having it whipshot back and forth from year to year. My concern is that's what we're doing it again, right? That we haven't really seen the options. We talked through them, and I'm not the only one who said, hang on a second, what's this option? And we end with not fixing a particular case, but how about 6 to 12, open it up for everybody?
I guess
Right.
I'm more open to including 6 to 8, just from seeing the class sizes. Now, I don't know what next year would look like if you move it to 7 to 8, 7 and 8, because I know the 5th grade class now is big, much bigger than the current 6th grade class. I just know class sizes are getting smaller, and I'm getting nervous of where this 6th grade class is gonna be when they're.
What's the right size class, and if it's getting smaller because this town is getting smaller, is that appropriate? And what's the
It's not
impact
though, it's
on the
the
offerings?
6th grade class, they're outliers. Well, the 3rd grade class is small too, but,
Well, go figure, not every class is the same, the
right,
range,
and
we get
so
bubble
4th
classes.
grade, yeah, 4th is a bubble, and 5th is a little smaller, and then 6th is smaller than that, and so.
If we were saying year to year, we're gonna try to hold classes to a particular size, and that was what we were doing from a policy, and every year we were gonna decide to do that, I think that's worthy of conversation. But what I'm concerned about is the approach we're taking to opening up school choice without talking about how do you set school choice year over year? What are we doing as a town?
So, and, you know, maybe I should know policy back to back, but I don't. I'd have to review it, but I think every year we've gone at the discretion of the building principal. Again, with the thought that we can absorb a change in the higher grades, because it's, if you bring somebody at the lower grades, you have them all throughout. You could get move-ins. And again, it's always been at the discretion of what is the recommendation from the building principal, the superintendent, of, hey, we think we can take on 6 in 9th grade and 2 in 10th.
I think a very important input, I know there've been years where almost universally the school has been uncomfortable with our decisions, so I don't know that we've always
Yeah.
followed the guidance.
I also, just for a point of clarification too, even opening it doesn't mean you have to identify any open slots.
Yep.
It would just be rather than our policy right now, in writing, it states that we accept students into grade 9 for school choice. It could become something around consideration for students in grades 6 and up. You do not have to have open seats. Uxbridge right now has K through 12 posted. There are several grades that have zeros because they just, population set it as such. Some have 5, some have 10, some have 12.
How would you make a decision on that? So if we said every year we're gonna choose,
Mhm.
and next year we wanted to open it up to just 6th grade,
Correct.
how would we go about doing that? So I guess I'm hearing, so we say 6 to 12, but we're not really saying 6 to 12, we're saying every year you get to choose the numbers.
So you'd have to, typically with school choice, right, and I don't know what your history was as far as why you selected 9.
Sometimes unpleasant, I don't know if you.
I'm wishing I hadn't made that statement about what my preference would be. Well, you do not have to have a set number of seats. You look at your population. I think we look at budget. We have to look at would there be reductions anywhere in the future? What would happen with class size if we did scenario A or B? Not these, but just if you have 6 teachers at this grade level, but 5 at that particular one, what would happen? If there's 5 open slots in grade 6 in the 23-24 year, there may be 0 in 24-25. It all just goes on what you feel the population at that point what could handle, and so it's flexible as long as you have dates stated that you will be considering the open enrollment for the randomized selection, and you post how many are open, when it closes, if it reopens because not all enroll, and you're very transparent about that, then you are in line with it. It is completely the decision of the school committee as to how many seats open on a year-to-year basis.
Paul, are you saying that your preference would be, and correct me please if I'm misunderstanding, rather than say every year we look at these numbers, we just say they need to cap at X if we're going to open it up?
I don't know. I'm saying if we're trying to set policy around how we'll choose seats and for what grades, I'd like to know what that choice is. Right? I think, now maybe I'm the only one on the board, I'm not a huge fan of the school choice in, but I think that there are good reasons, there are good arguments for why you would use it, right? It's, I don't know that all the money you get is always the best choice. I think sometimes it can impact what I would in the past have called sort of degrees of freedom around what you can do with a bubble class. The disparity of classes allows you to sometimes move staff around and accommodate. I also have some concerns about you develop a system, or if you develop a process of bringing in more students, it's sort of self-fulfilling. We need this much resources because this is how big it is. And all that might be appropriate. I just don't know that we've ever really effectively articulated how do we choose what we're doing with school choice. More concerned with the process, go figure.
It's valid.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a tough one. I think for folks in the public, you look at it and think, what's 1 or 2 kids? And that is the challenge. We want to have the flexibility of a district. We've decided not to do it at the lower levels because you could get it moving and all of a sudden you're touching the top of the class size. And that we want to be cautious on. And, again, we've made it practice years ago to say at the high school, we feel like we can absorb this because it's a little bit more controllable. We get the students that generally move out to whatever schools or options.
Demonstrably large numbers
Yep.
fall out.
And, I mean, the process has been, through the recommendation of the principals, the superintendent, they come and say, we think next year will be 6 options now, 6 open slots. Now, I don't know if that's just based on, hey, here's the numbers, the programs, I think this is what we could do, or guess what, 6 people reached out. I think we can manage that. That sort of thing. We have the ability then to say, no, we're comfortable with 4. or no, we wanna open it to 8 as a school committee. That being said, I think most of the years, we'll say a number like 8 and only 5 come, or 4.
And if you get 4 or 5, you think you're making a ton of money, but you get 4 or 5, they're in, and the following year you got a real budget issue. And that 4 or 5 doesn't keep you with all the programs you want, it just keeps you with 4 or 5 more kids. Right, what's that break-even point? Or when you bring kids in, how do you know that's really gonna continue to maintain the programs, or is it going to be a year where you don't have a good budget, and you've got more kids, and you rightfully have people asking, we've lost all the programs, and yet I'm still having to go to classes of 25, and 4 of the kids in here don't even pay taxes in this town, right? Maybe a good argument that I'm all wrong, but I've heard that one, and I think we ought to know what we're getting into.
Yeah, this has always been a tough conversation.
It's a good one.
It is, and you know, again, I think for a lot of people, they hear it and it sounds pretty straightforward, pretty easy, but there's a lot of considerations to make, and our concern has always been, we don't wanna stress the district.
I'm voting to walk away from $50,000, and then we've got an $800,000 deficit. And
Yep.
the 50,000 is, I get it, it's 50 grand, but it doesn't fix your huge deficit.
It doesn't, but I think a lot of times when you get to the high school and the middle school, you have to run certain programs. The programs are there.
Sure.
A few extra kids doesn't often make the difference like it would in the elementary.
I would
but
think that would be
still,
part of what we
there's more
would be
to it.
discussing, that we would be
Mhm.
looking at, rather than, here, we got this one scenario, can we help a family sliding into something else, that rather we look at scenarios like that. How are you making that decision?
Mhm.
What programs do you need? What sort of baseline?
What about, instead of 6 and up, what about 8th and up? Maybe lower it to 8th, knowing that kids tend to look to BVT, Norfolk Aggie, other places
So
with
if you
that.
open up 8th, show me where we're losing kids in 8th. Because if
We're not in
yeah.
8th, but if we opened it up earlier, I don't know. Would it stay more steady? I don't know.
It would seem crazy to come in for a year and then go to BV.
So it's, this has always been a thorough conversation. I think what we have is we've got 3 options that we will see kind of presented. We'll get a chance to discuss those and potentially vote or adjust in January, you know, if we choose to make a change in how school choice works. We can do that as this committee, or we can do it through the policy subcommittee to try to find a way to really tighten up that approach and find something that we can agree on if we choose to make a change.
Would you like me to take it through policy, looking at providing them with the research and the legal wording that would be recommended to try to provide some tighter parameters around the consideration?
I'm always a fan of it being legally correct. Yeah, that would be great.
It does help, thank you.
Yeah, just, you know, it's my
So
preference.
Bruce and I can decide.
Yeah, I mean, if it passes the subcommittee, I feel a little bit better about when it comes to us that, again, it will still have enjoyable conversation, but it's never a quick and easy one. There's a lot to think about with it. All right. So I'll jump to the next thing and welcome Dan Durgan for an information technology update.
Just gonna give a brief update of what's happening in the technology world over the summer and this fall. Over the summer, we were able to update our graphics computer lab. Those PCs were original to the building, so they're 7 years old. So we're able to get those up, and our students are able to use the Adobe suite effectively with new PCs and monitors. And we're able to do this through the capital fund through the town. The other large project that we were able to actually just complete this week was the E911 Raid Bombs Act, which is a mandatory compliancy for any large facility. Basically what this was is this guy was in a large warehouse and he called 911 and couldn't speak. First responders couldn't find him in the location. So every phone has to have an exact location that relays to 911 dispatch. So for example, if you're on the elementary school, room 115, it will say first floor elementary school, room 115, along with, the caller ID of the elementary school. So we were able to complete that just this past week. It's been a long process of working with our phone vendor and making sure that all of our phones were compliant. This past fall, I applied for and received a grant through Maya at the advice of Jim Smith. This grant will be used for cybersecurity testing. It will be a joint effort between Town Hall, Police Department, and the school department to do an outside penetration test of our firewalls. We are not able to do an internal test with the funding we receive, but in speaking with Jim Smith, it's something we're going to look at in the future, just to get a kind of baseline of how are we doing, and are there any needs specifically that we need to address. Our 3-year internet contract is up this July. I put out an RFP this past month, and I'm very confident that we'll be able to increase our internet speed and also reduce our costs. And just as an aside, on the town portion of this, we're completing a ring network through the town with fiber, and we're hooking the school up in an emergency or a pinch. We can run municipal internet through the town, or we can run the school internet through the municipal. So, just as an aside. I put out an RFP using E-rate Category 2 funds to upgrade our district wireless. Typically, we've been on a 5-year cycle with the wireless, and this July we'll be coming up on our 5 years, and our licensing is expiring. So, E-rate, for those of you who don't know, is a federal program. It's based upon your free and reduced lunch numbers. We receive a 50% discount in Sutton, so the additional 50% I plan on submitting through the town's capital fund to cover the wireless. And to conclude, just to give you an update on our one-to-one initiative, we're finishing our year 2 of all students having Chromebooks. We are seeing at this point an uptick in damages. They've been used for 2 years now. The vast majority of these are accidental damages. They're students, they're kids, they're bringing them back and forth every day. But it is something we're going to have to look at. What is the viable use of Chromebooks in Sutton? I did apply for an ECF grant last spring, emergency connectivity funding, to replace all of our 1,260 Chromebooks. Cost was around $440,000. I still have not heard whether we've been approved or not. So that's, in a nutshell, technology update.
Thanks. Any questions?
How much would do you anticipate the internet contract savings to be?
About $8,000 a year.
Any thoughts on like more of those class carts, like how much those would be, and would that reduce maybe damage of kids bringing it back and forth?
Yeah, in the elementary school is where the class carts would be used,
Yeah.
in early learning center. The vast majority of damages is in the middle school.
Oh.
I think it's just the nature of the age of the kids, and just the middle school in general. So.
And you wanna bring more middle schoolers in?
They come with a cart.
I was thinking the damage would be lower, so sorry.
It was nice to call out Andy.
Ransomware, I hear about it on the news every now and then. We don't have any of that, right?
What's that?
Excellent.
Oh. No, it's always on our mind, and this will be our 3rd year. I just re-enrolled our municipal and school employees for our cybersecurity training. At this point, I think employees just look at it as it's another checkbox that I have to do. But it has helped. I mean, I have employees that'll grab me in the hallway and say, you know, I got this fraud alert at home or on my text, and it really is reaching some of these people, and I've heard the positive stories. I'm not sure if it's a Maya requirement now, but as I said, we've been doing this for 3 years, and we're continuing it this year as well, because the best defense against ransomware is employee education.
I think some parents might think, well, you know, can we help with that capital expense of, you know, my child already has a Chromebook. But I'm sure there's an added effort from IT. You know, you have a consistency if you manage them.
For consistency and under our management, we push out, for instance, the biggest one is MCAS testing.
Yep.
Which one of the huge benefits of having Chromebooks for every student is MCAS testing. Before, we were sharing 5 computer labs between 3 buildings and shuffling schedules, and have high school kids coming to the elementary school to test in their labs. Now, I mean, we're at the point where we could have all 3 buildings testing at the same time, and there's no issue. But in order for me to push out the MCAS app or our web filter, things like that, it needs to be under our management, which a personally owned device wouldn't be.
Okay, thank you.
And 130K a year would get you a 3-year cycle on Chromebooks. If we had to just start doing it,
Mhm.
is 3 years a good ballpark on how long
At this
they
point,
live?
with us going into our 3rd year, we bought them in February 2 years ago, so I'm gonna say 3 years is the usable life.
So current price, if it were just an ongoing expense, it's $130 a year.
I mean, I see how my kids throw their backpacks around. That's what I worry about when I hear the damage. It's like,
I do.
not everybody has a computer bag. Yeah.
Walking down the hallway during passing, just throwing them into lockers and just cringing. So.
Yeah, there's a screen in there, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I mean, the usable life of a $200 Chromebook, I mean, 3 years is, I think, acceptable.
The price where you said 400 something, right? 1,600 of them at $250 is just $400K.
Plus the management license. I want to say that's $27 or $29 a piece for us to have the ability to push updates and programs to them.
You get that one time with the unit when you buy it?
Correct, yep.
Non-transferable.
They're non-transferable. They're transferable between the same models, but, you know, if I bought a model last year, it's not transferable to this.
All right.
Computer companies.
Any other questions? Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. All right.
Also under facilities and operations, just a couple of
Yeah,
quick updates.
please.
A grant was filed today by McClure Engineering in partnership with Sutton Public Schools in the amount of $50,000 to be used towards mitigating the impact of the PFAS in the water system. This, coupled with the $50,000 set aside that we've been discussing, we believe, if awarded, would address the immediate concerns, which would be the consideration of a filtration system that would remove the higher levels. Right now, again, we're very thankful that McClure is the one that submitted this. We are the partner, and now we are, as of this afternoon, in the sit and wait portion of that, because it now goes off to the government for consideration. So I do not believe that we will have an update on whether or not this grant is secured through McClure for at least 2 more months.
And I missed, if we received the grant, we could mitigate and start using water again?
We could work with and look towards filtration systems, and I do have the application in case anyone wanted to see it too. But it would let us look at a couple of filtration systems to at least start to work on removals of additional chemicals.
This is money to assess whether a filtration system would work, not to actually procure a filtration system.
This could provide us with the beginnings. That was the most that they could state. It would be the beginning of other steps. I wish I could tell you a lot more about that other than this grant right here is, it continues the study, it takes the recommendations from the DEP, which we still don't have. So right now it's it's a bit of a guessing game as far as what are they going to say we have to do with all of the wells. If we can have additional filtration systems put on wells that right now do not have some of the elevated pieces, but that would capture additional readings, additional chemicals, anything that are additives in the water, then we could also continue to monitor it. This does not solve the whole problem. This $100,000 together would not finalize it. But in Roger's words before he left, it would go a long way to really getting towards the bottom of it and having a clear path forward.
So it's neither the full solution nor just looking at it, it's somewhere in the middle.
Correct. McClure, however, approached us. They knew that we were interested in it, and this is their field, and said, we really believe that this could be a partnership that that we could explore as far as, you know, really understanding your water situation and how we can move it forward. I'm very thankful to them for taking this on. There was a lot of technical information that we simply wouldn't have had, and we would have had to go into this from a whole different point of view. They were eligible to apply for the grant. So that's one piece.
Thank you.
Sand and salt are in, machines are ready to go. Those were tested last week. We did 2 weeks ago have issues with heat in both the Simonian Center and the elementary. However, we worked on it over the course of 2 days, which fortunately were 2 of our warmer days, and they were able to determine the cause of this along with the oil company. There was some sludge that had moved through, and it contained algae, and it blocked up the filters. It came right after we had an oil delivery, so we worked with the oil company because while we may not have the exact root cause, we did know that it took both of us to work to address it. That concludes the facilities and operations. The additions come under the superintendent's report.
Thank you. And we'll move right on to the superintendent's report.
So,
Many.
certainly like to recognize and congratulate our athletic teams for their outstanding performance this fall, as well as in the MIAA tournament. You know, we discussed it briefly at the last meeting too, but you know, this is such a source of pride for the town, for the schools, for the students, that I wanted to make sure that we again mentioned it. On another positive, I am pleased to announce that on Friday, late afternoon, we were awarded a $112,500 grant for the development of social emotional programming for both students and for staff. This will provide training for staff. It will provide programming in the schools. Part of the proposal sends a number of our staff, a team, to a school who has really gone above and beyond as far as social emotional development and inclusive practices. Students who may have received services in other classrooms are included. It is a very hands-on few days where you're really learning from the people who are the experts. Schools in Florida, I have been part of a team that I did not personally attend, but I have sent a team in the past. The people who run the school are also in the area in the spring, and this grant would cover them coming in and actually doing some on-site coaching too. In addition, it looks at identifying some part-time external services that we could then bring into the school too to support students' social and emotional growth. This was a grant that Andrea Ellis-Thomas worked on, and along with the team, we were both so excited to have this one. This is a nice opportunity for us to take a longer look at what are we doing for programming, how can we examine our own practices and move it forward. The next piece I have is to inform you that Ms. Riley Soboleski will be joining us as the student representative to the school committee effective January 9th. Riley is a junior in high school. She is pleased to pass along to us that she has been a Sutton student every year but one during her student career. She works right now in our aftercare program, and she also serves as a student intern in first grade. She hopes to be an educator someday. Diane has ordered the placard, so she'll have her student representative sign here, and we'll be here in January. I will meet her that evening and bring her up. We've covered the middle school and the high school band performance, right, Tuesday, Wednesday, 7 to 8. I do want to announce to you that today, Matt Murphy began in the role of facilities director. He takes over the role from Roger, who served our Sutton community for almost 19 years. Matt is from North Smithfield, Rhode Island. He has a background in facilities oversight and management. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in public relations from the State University of New York at Oswego. He will be joining us in February for an update on his status and the projects that we're working on. As today was his first day, we really felt kind of bad inviting him here to talk about work. This is, it seemed to be fair to give him 60 days in before making his public appearance. As far as personnel goes, we still have those 2 positions open for the IA at the high school level. We do have a new application as of this weekend. Principal McCarthy will be able to review that upon his return. He is currently, at a conference where he's presenting on the Connections program at a national conference. The tenets of this program, as well as the approach he has taken to training and engaging students, it's commendable. It is the focus for them. We've really become a leader in equity and diversity, and while we always have room for improvement, it's reassuring to see where the students are taking this programming. We do have applications coming in on a regular basis for the principal's position for the Simonian Center. We do have an interim position posted to get us through the first few weeks. There is a candidate. Committee members for both have been identified, and we will be convening next week. I will have more updates on that in January. School safety update. I have attended both information sessions regarding the improvement of school safety from a digital and a physical point of view, and I do remain in touch with Chief Belcito regarding the possibility of a state-sponsored training right here in this area. We have offered space at the school system for a regional training in this case. This is in line with one of my professional goals. It's certainly always on the radar of our educators. To that end, I have also been spot checking doors, and while we are not perfect, we are much improved. I'm pleased to see the advancements in that area. I do anticipate closing the campus to outsiders this winter, though. I mean, that's something we've talked about briefly. It is an issue. It's also a communication issue. It's one that we've talked about at previous meetings too. I have been making a concerted effort when I see people to just start to have conversations. I have watched our students have to run around individuals who are not yielding when we have athletic teams that are practicing. We've watched students who were afraid because there were dogs unleashed, and the kids were afraid and had to go to a different area during school time. We're not talking about a round-the-clock closure. This is just going to be when there's schools or student programming in session. It is certainly from a safety point of view. It is not to be a bad neighbor by any means. And that's why I really feel like it's important for me to keep talking to people as I see them. We have had people who have changed their practice and said, absolutely, I never thought of it that way. But the day that we had, I believe it was 6 students, have to go to a different area because someone came through during school time and just unleashed the dog, and the kids were terrified. There's liability on a lot of areas, especially on the owner of the dog. These are not people who, they want their dog to be out enjoying it. They want to be able to use this facility. But I think during the school day, we really have got to be very concerted, or make a concerted effort to know who is on campus and to have it closed down to outsiders. The traffic has really increased. It's been quite noticeable.
How do you let them know?
So right now, it's personal conversations, but the town, we have a meeting tomorrow morning here too, and they have said they are in support of it, and we will just have to increase the signs. So we're getting pricing on signs right now to order. The difficulty, honestly, is enforcement. All I can do is just kindly ask. I'm not going to be yelling out the window, right? And I think this is just gonna be something where the more you raise awareness to it and the more it just becomes the practice, the easier it is. But there have been several instances. I mean, we had an instance just before I got here that I was made aware of through a report where someone was in a building without any need to be, and it resulted in having to have them removed. There have been other times too where people have wandered around. You come through a door if there's something that's open, or you're on campus and no one knows why they're there, and by the time you can catch up with them, you didn't know why they were there. It could have been extremely innocent. They could have just taken a wrong turn and they drove down to turn around. What if you do that and you have a camera on your dashboard? Right, now that leaves a different impression. It could be very innocent. So it's just an increased awareness and just stopping people and reminding them. I have not ever been to a place before that once you started posting signs and that became the practice, that people didn't abide by it. It's a shift in culture, and again, it is not being a bad neighbor. It is being a responsible administrator in a school district where we owe these kids a safe place to learn every single day, and we know who is on campus. And that way, right there, when we see someone who isn't typically on campus, we can identify them and just approach them and help them to come back after school hours. That concludes the superintendent's update.
Band concert tomorrow night and Wednesday night.
Tomorrow night and Wednesday night. High school tomorrow night, middle school on Wednesday night. Both of them are 7 until 8.
Great, thank you,
Yep. If anyone
I'll
was at the
cover
tree
the middle
lighting, you saw a
school.
little preview.
thank you.
Or the trees, plural, lighting.
Questions? Okay. School committee goals, I did send something out a couple weeks ago. I got some feedback, for the most part, pretty good. Again, and that's on me, I've gotta put it so we can have it included with a packet and make it available online, but, I'll remind the committee, if anybody has anything they wanna add or anything, adjustments, please let me know, and I'll make that in consideration. With that, I mean, we're in budget season right now, so that's gonna be a goal that we're gonna be hitting over the next several weeks. We do have a meeting scheduled for next week for budget discussion. Transportation, we do still wanna have a review on that, but we've got a couple things that are a little bit more precedent at this point. And, yeah, from there, maybe at the next meeting or the one after that, you can give us an update on
Mhm.
where the portal is. Yeah.
Harrison does continue to gather information regarding the transportation piece. We have a number of districts who are also completing studies right now, so it's an interesting piece to be looking at. The only other piece I had was just a review of the goals, just to let you know that all 4 goals that you approved continue to be addressed, with a focus right now on equity and continuity and building the structures that we need to make the changes. I've been talking with teachers, had the opportunity to attend 3 staff meetings today too, really looking at where do we go next, focusing on professional development, focusing on our understanding of what student needs are, how do we define equity in a district. I think when you talk about equity and diversity, people have one thing in mind, but you really have to define what you mean by that. And this idea of all students receiving what it is that they need in order to be successful is where we're really headed with equity. So we are taking a look at resources. We have piloted a couple of things. We are going to be working with some of the state resources as well that they now have. We have been in contact with one of their experts and invited her to come out and speak. She has agreed. She'll come out and work with our staff right after the beginning of the year. So
Great.
it's good. It's a nice way to use people who are not only experts in the field, but who have done a lot of this research to bring it to us and save us that step, so that we can then focus on the self-examination and determine what makes the most sense for us to move forward.
All right, thank you. Questions? New business.
You mentioned the concert on the gazebo. It was wonderful. Band's wonderful. It's great.
Was that this past weekend?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's usually quite a great event, the Chain of Lights. Unfortunately, this was the first year in a long time I've been away, but it's usually a great take.
It was wet and windy, but the rains calmed down, the wind calmed down, the band was excellent.
And Santa came.
And Santa came.
Any other items? All right. Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Gibbons, aye.
Edwards, aye.
Brennan, aye.
Darling, I.
Jerome, aye. We can adjourn. Those seconds are taking a moment. Scaring me.
The way you say it, I think that's the second.
Yeah. And
Takes me a
I
minute.
try to make it easy on everybody by saying I will entertain a
Or
motion
so
and read it
moved.
all out.